Hi again. Welcome back. It is Tuesday, January 12th. And yesterday we started our book called The Art of Miss Chu by Patricia Polacco. And we read about half of it yesterday and then stopped and summarized and talked about and just made sure we understood what was happening in the book to kind of practice those fix up and monitoring strategies. So we summarized it at the end of our lesson yesterday. This is about a little girl named Trisha. She lives in California. She loves to draw. She loves art. And her teacher, Mr. Donovan, had asked her if she wanted to participate in a special after school art class, like an art club. And so she did. And she's learning about some different concepts and being able to share that with her teacher and her family. Probably Mr. Donovan eventually. So that's kind of where we left off. And Trisha had asked if she could draw Mr. Donovan's father. They called him Da because he was from, I believe it was Vietnam. So we'll see if how she does when she draws that picture. So we're going to go on. Here we go. The next art class, Miss Chu called me up to her desk. Everyone else had handed in one or two sketches. I had done over 20. Your drawings are very good. Her eyes smiled as if we had a secret. The cat, the apples, your mother and brother, you've captured every detail. I particularly like your use of negative space. Negative space? See this drawing, Theresa? What do you see? She held up a picture. Two people looking at each other. Anyone could see that. Now, Theresa, instead of looking at the two faces, look at what is between them. Nothing. Wait. A tall, stemmed cup. First, you read negative space. Now you are reading the actual object. What an idea. I started looking at all of my own pictures for negative space. I was so happy. But a few weeks later, Mr. Donovan was called to the office. When he came back, his eyes were red. He couldn't seem to talk. He just stared out of the window. Finally, he spoke. Mida died today, he whispered. Our whole class got out of our seats and tried to comfort him. He left for Ireland the next day. Ireland, it was not Vietnam. That is when we got Mrs. Spaulding, a substitute. She never smiled. Worst of all, when I was taking my weekly test, she came up behind me and ripped the paper out from under my pencil. Time's up, she barked. But Mrs. Spaulding, I'm not finished. Mr. Donovan always lets me have extra time because I'm not Mr. Donovan. And when I say you're finished, you're finished. Of course, I had failed the test. That's when she got just plain mean. Your time would be better spent studying for your tests instead of leaving this school to take art classes, she hissed. And I'm going to see if I can make that happen. I tried to be brave and not tell Miss Chu, but in class I began to cry and blurted out the threat that Miss Spaulding had made. Miss Chu began to shake her head slowly. Theresa, she said, you say you can't read fast enough to finish your tests? I nodded. I watch you draw, and you begin a drawing by drawing what is the negative space. I remembered the picture of the two girls facing the glass. When you see a word, I think you don't see the letters at all. I think you first see the space around them, the pattern they make. No wonder your reading takes you so much time, Miss Chu said. I smiled, but I still wasn't quite sure what she meant. I know someone I think that can help. A reading specialist. No one is taking you from this class. I sprang to my feet and hugged her. And tomorrow, Teresa, I am assigning you an easel. You are not only ready for painting, maybe you can be part of the high school spring art show. The following day, Mrs. Spalding announced we would take a timed citywide test that would determine what classes we would take next year. We'd have 45 minutes to finish. I only finished half of the test. I knew my art class was over. But when I told Miss Chu, she said, "We'll just see about that." With my mom's permission, she would take me herself to see her friend, the reading specialist. After class, Miss Chu took me to her car, a convertible. As we drove off, the car sounded like it was growling, and I loved it when we drove by my school and Mrs. Spalding actually saw us. Dr. McClare played what seemed like 100 reading games with me, but I wasn't afraid. I knew he was trying to help. When he finally called Miss Chu in, he said, "You are spot on, Miss Chu. She reads patterns, not words. This takes time." Miss Chu wanted a meeting of all the players. Everyone came. The principal, Mrs. Spalding, Miss Chu, Dr. McClare, and my mother. Mrs. Spalding said, "The extra art class was simply a distraction. Trisha is drawing instead of studying." Miss Chu said, "But she needs extra time to finish tests. All tests." When she and Dr. McClare said that I see things differently than most students, Mrs. Spalding scoffed, as if to say, "What could an art teacher know about how a child learns? I don't tell you how to teach a child to draw." It was as if she didn't think art teachers were real teachers, that maybe art wasn't even a real class. Mr. Donovan came back exactly 2 days later. I couldn't help myself. I ran to him and hugged him. "I'm so glad you are back," I said. When someone else told him what Mrs. Spalding was trying to do, he got really red in the face. And I don't know exactly what happened after that day, but it seemed that Mrs. Spalding was no longer needed as a substitute, not in the whole school. So I went on to Miss Chu's class every Tuesday and Thursday. Of course, as soon as Mr. Donovan gave me extra time when I took my tests, I passed them with flying colors. I decided to use the sketch of Mr. Donovan's father for my first painting. When Miss Chu saw it, she just stood there and looked at it. "Teresa, this sketch is so full of emotion and love. You have most certainly learned the language of art. Mr. Donovan will be so moved." When I finished the painting, she said, "Teresa, this painting is going to be part of the art show. You will be the only exhibiting artist who isn't a high school student." I couldn't believe it. Me? Me? Me in the spring art show? Later that day, Miss Chu asked me to stay after class. She handed me a package wrapped in bright red tissue paper and said softly, "We Chinese believe that red brings luck." And Teresa, remember this ancient Chinese proverb: "Yesterday is history, tomorrow a mystery, today a gift. That is why it is called the present." She smiled. When I opened the gift, I caught my breath. It was one of Miss Chu's painting smocks. For me. I wanted to cry. When I looked into her eyes, she had tears too. Only a week later, I wore my new smock to the art show. And this page does not have any words on it. It's a picture, an illustration of what the art show looked like. Light was dancing off the mirror chandeliers. Our paintings were everywhere. I was so proud. Then I saw Mr. Donovan standing in front of my painting of his father. He couldn't speak. He took my hand and squeezed it. Miss Chu came up to us. She looked so radiant. It's beautiful, isn't it? She whispered to him. I looked at the two of them. Miss Chu was right. This moment was a present. It turned out to be the defining moment in my young life. I was set on a course to be an artist. It could be no other way, thanks to the art of amazing Miss Chu. So, and that is the end. So, Miss Chu was definitely an inspiration to Trisha. She looked up to Miss Chu so much, and Miss Chu taught her a lot of things and stood up for her when things got tough and when the other teacher was not treating her very, very nicely. And she was able to figure out what Trisha's problems were and what would be the most helpful. So there's a lot of lessons to be learned through this book. And as we kind of summarize it and we talk about those fix-up strategies, just making sure we understand it, then it's important that we kind of talk. This book by Patricia Polacco is actually based on kind of a true story. The author, Miss Polacco, had a teacher named Miss Chu, and so this book is kind of based on her own story and her own happenings as she was growing up in high school. So very cool because it's kind of a true story. So look for this in your local library, or maybe you have it at home, or maybe you can look it up online if you are interested in reading. But we're finished for today, and I hope to see you tomorrow. We'll have our next read aloud.